All right, I have a special guest on a Jacobus podcast today, none other than my father, Blanchard Jacobus, who was critical in starting me down the path of wanting to own my own company, own my own business, do my own thing, and not necessarily be an employee for somebody else. He kind of set that trend early on whenever I was I guess young, but I really remember it starting in the middle school years and then through high school and beyond. And so here to talk to him about that, and excited to dive into his businesses, what he did, what he's doing. But to give you guys a little bit of background, he has been an entrepreneur for over 30 years. His focus was on software training for large companies such as Texas Instruments, Johnson & Johnson, Southwest Airlines, and the United States government. He is currently a chaplain in the Civil Air Patrol. He produces daily devotions called Running to Him, and is editor for this very podcast. Welcome, Dad. Welcome, Blanchard Jacobus.
Thank you very much. I enjoy being here.
Awesome. So let's take it back to kind of where your entrepreneurial spirit, you got that bug. You grew up with a father that was an entrepreneur. Give me a little insight as far as what he did.
Well, my dad was an entrepreneur from way back.
Right.
I mean, from the get-go. He, when I was alive, or born, he owned some transportation companies, some scows and barges, and they used to ship trap rock, which is stones or pebbles that are used to lay the groundwork of a road. And so they would ship them up and down the Hudson River in New York. And so I remember going out on tugboats and towing the scows and meeting the scow captains and all sorts of things. So it was kind of an interesting life. So that was for the first 10 years of my life, I remember doing that.
Right. So from when you were born, he was doing that. He had his own company that he was running. And how did he start it? Did he start it kind of on his own?
His dad was an entrepreneur as well.
But he didn't inherit the company, is what I'm
No,
getting at.
he started those. He actually started in the early 30s doing something called factoring, which was you basically front money to people and then get a return rather than doing a business loan. You'll buy inventory, the person will sell it, and then they'll give you the money back.
Sure, gotcha. Okay. I mean, it's exactly a loan.
Yeah, it is a loan, but it's a different style.
Right. So did that, whenever you were watching him own his business, did that kind of instill that you wanted to do that, or is that something that you think later on? Because there's ups and downs. I don't know what type of ups and downs there were with your dad, but you see those in business. And so was that something that made you think, okay, I want to be in business for myself?
At that age, the answer probably was no. Mm-hmm. I was only 10 or 11
right.
when he sold them. When we moved to Arizona, my mother and father bought a laundry and dry cleaner,
right.
and they kind of built that from a very small store to what my dad called a haberdashery, a place that sold clothing.
Right.
And so we catered predominantly to college students, and so that's probably where I picked up most of the entrepreneurial stuff.
Because at that point you were a little bit older.
I was from the age of 12 to 18 or late 17. We were in Arizona,
right?
And so I went. I learned the business from there. I used to go wake up every morning at 6 a.m. and actually before that, and go up to the laundry and open up the laundromat, and then at 10 o'clock at night I'd go back up to the laundromat and close it up.
Okay.
And so that's what I did from the time that we bought it until the time that he died.
Was it an expectation that you were working in the business, or how did? Or
it was. You're going to work in the business.
So it was truly like it was a family-owned company.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to where your brothers working in there. I guess Charles was.
Well, my older brother is 6 years older than me.
Right. So he was.
So he, when I was 12, he was 18. And so while he worked a little bit in the company, mm-hmm. He was going to school, mm-hmm. and then he was drafted. So So the answer is no. He didn't work a whole lot in the laundry dry cleaner.
Right, but
my twin brother did.
You and him. What about how old was Georgiana? How much older?
Georgiana's 8 years older than me, and
Okay.
she worked in the business as well. But because of her mental capabilities, it was difficult for her to do much other than wait behind the desk and make change and things like that.
Right, sure. So do you think that had a role though in you wanting to do that, like and start your own business?
I think probably yes. I didn't know anything else. I knew that when my father sold his companies, how frustrated he was.
What do you mean by that? Will you expand?
When he sold the companies in New York, he worked for the other company for about 6 months, and it was a miserable experience for him. I mean, just absolutely miserable. He doesn't like to take orders from people.
Sure.
He thought he was the boss, and when he was no longer the boss, he still thought he was the boss, and it was just a problem for him. So I think all of us, the three boys, ultimately got the entrepreneurial bug, so to speak, from my dad and my mother's dad.
Do you think that it's something that it's what you see, so therefore, because I kind of feel that way about myself. It's what you see, it's what you grew up with. In a way, it's what you're comfortable with. You're not working, you don't see your parents working for anybody, so therefore you kind of feel like, okay, that's what I'll do. I'm not going to work for anybody.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. I think it's a culture thing. Rather than necessarily being born with the bug, so to speak. I think culturally you grow up and you say, you know what, I can do this on my own. I don't need to work for somebody else.
Sure. Do you think that along those same lines, so you don't think that you are born an entrepreneur? Do you think that you can learn to be an entrepreneur?
Oh, I think you can absolutely learn. Now, I think some people have a real desire to do things on their own, but I think anybody can learn to be an entrepreneur. There's no big trick to it.
Right.
It's, hard work and long hours and you'll make quick money.
Yeah, well, maybe so, maybe. Well, but obviously there's still some ups and downs to that. But like, there's no doubt that if you put in the time and the effort and know what you're doing,
sure, then
I think that some money will come along. But
and a little bit of luck, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. So moving forward past that, you're 18. What happens after you're 18?
My dad died.
When you were 17, though,
when I was 17.
Okay, right.
He died in March of '68.
Yeah.
We moved back to Connecticut, where I was born, and I worked for a gentleman who owned an educational publishing house and an educational toy store. So my mother worked for him as well, and while I was there, he asked me if I'd like to get into the educational publishing business, and so I learned how to publish a book, literally from writing to copy to all that stuff.
What do you think? Is that different now? I mean,
oh yeah.
To publish a book now, it's what you click enter on the computer, and
yeah,
now
you
you're
design it all on the
published.
computer. But we used letterpresses, and so all of those were laid out, and it was a real.
It was a job.
Yeah,
it was hard work.
Yeah, but the book that I helped publish was placed in the New England school systems for teaching kids as early as the age of 3 to learn how to read.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. That's cool. That's something I had no idea about. So you go work at the Sky Publishing. What do you do after that?
I was drafted in '69.
Okay.
In December.
So you were there for about a year or two.
I worked for him for a year, and I was drafted in '69 and was sent down to Fort Dix for basic training, and I actually I went into the Army in February of '70, but my draft date was December 10th,
right,
'69. So February '70, I went to Fort Dix after 8 weeks of basic training. Then I went down to Redstone Arsenal, Alabama.
So, tell me a little bit about being drafted, because honestly, I can't imagine that would go over very well in 2020, right? I mean, ultimately, I feel like there would be a revolt, like people wouldn't go.
Well, it was the same. It was the same way in '68 and '69. The Vietnam War was very unpopular.
Yeah.
being in the military, I was spat upon when I was flying, and somebody would come up and swear at me or something.
Even though it wasn't your doing that you were drafted, just because you went?
Just because I was wearing uniform.
Really?
Yeah, we eventually, towards the end of the war, you were told not to wear your uniform except on base, because people were so violently opposed to it. So when I received my draft notice, the Army at that point was wanting people so badly, they literally, if you went to the AV station, which was the place where you had your physicals and things like that, you would if you passed your physical, you literally were drafted that day. You were inducted that day and taken off to the basic training. So I got some advice from a friend of my older brother's. He was my older brother was in Vietnam at that point,
right?
And I got some advice from a friend to say, go down to the AP station under the auspices of being under a recruiter, and then if you pass the physical, then when they try and draft you, just tell them that you're under the auspices of a recruiter, and you won't have to go that day. I mean, you'll obviously have to go, but you won't have to go that day. Mm-hmm. So that's exactly what I did.
So, but why is that a big deal? Just to get your affairs in order to get things in order?
There was a thing at that point called deferred enlistment, and you could enlist at that point and go 60 days down the road before you actually were taken off to basic training.
Right.
So that gives you time to get everything in order. And
right. So you were in the military for 8 years.
Uh-huh.
How did the military shape you? Did that, because I know that there's some very important things that happened while you were in the military, but did that shape you from a discipline standpoint or structure standpoint? Going to your business, right? Did that help you?
My father was a very strict disciplinarian.
Oh my gosh, I've heard stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For example, he had air mattresses from the Second World War, and the air mattresses had metal valves in them, so you'd unscrew them a little bit. And he required that my twin brother and me, and my older brother when he was in the house, blow up an air mattress every single morning before we go to school.
For what reason?
He said it would build our lungs.
Okay.
And I think functionally he was just trying to make sure that we understood that he was the boss, and
right.
So and you couldn't take the valve out. You had to leave the valve in. So there was a sense of building, but so he was a strict disciplinarian. So basic training was not a big deal for me.
Right.
I mean, I was used to being yelled at and used to being disciplined, so to speak.
Your dad was a yeller? Because you weren't a big yeller.
He didn't raise his voice terrifically. I mean, he didn't scream, but when he raised his voice, you knew that something was wrong.
Right.
So I think that's probably where I am. You very rarely hear me get really, really upset, but
right.
you know that if I start talking quietly or if my voice goes up a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So what happened during in the military that kind of shaped you moving forward? Because I do want to touch on who you met, and because I know that had a big impact on you and where that took you right after the military.
So when I was sent overseas, I happened to have become a member of the United States Figure Skating Association. So the only place that I could ice skate during the summer was at a place in a town called Bad Nauheim.
Really? Can I touch on that real
Sure.
quick? How does that come to be, right? Like, so back in my younger days too, I was a member of the United States Ping Pong Association or whatever, just because I love ping pong, and I thought, okay, maybe I'll try and compete or whatever.
Sure.
How did you get started in figure skating? That seems like I don't know how people get involved in that. I never see it in Dallas. Maybe it was more popular in Connecticut. I don't know.
Well, it was. I learned to skate obviously in Connecticut during the winter, but when I was in Alabama,
I can't just imagine you doing like a triple Lutz or something either.
Yeah. When I was in Alabama, I got involved with a couple of people that were ice skaters, and so they happened to be members of the United States Figure Skating Association, And so I started doing testing, and I achieved some kind of limited notoriety, at least in
Sure.
Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah.
But I was too old. I mean, you don't start ice skating at 19 years old.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure. Yeah.
So at any rate, I was a member there, and when I went overseas, I wanted to continue. And so there was a little town by the name of Bad Nauheim, which is about 30 miles from where I was stationed. And that's where I met my wife.
Right.
And she had, it was during the summertime, and her sisters had wanted to go swimming, and she had wanted to go ice skating. So she went ice skating that day, and that's when we met.
Which is pretty awesome. Which
Yeah.
is pretty insane too, because we've talked about before, and I talk about it with Angela all the time, the butterfly effect. I don't know if that is, are you familiar with what that is? So essentially, in theory, the reason why they call it the butterfly effect is because a butterfly flaps its wings over here and then ends up affecting something way down, right?
Yeah.
And so and what that means to me is like the decisions I make today are going to affect generations to come.
Sure.
And the decision Mom made that day not to go to the pool, instead to go to the ice skating rink, it shaped your life, my life, everybody's life without anybody knowing it, right?
Sure.
And so if you think about like what actually has to happen in order for somebody to meet like that, literally it could be a split-second decision that could change the rest of your life because you decided to go to the ice skating rink. And now 50 years later almost, or 60 years later, no,
50 years later.
50, you met when?
We met in 70. Well, we married in 72. We met in 71.
Okay, so almost 50 years later from the time that you met, you're now sitting across from your almost 40-year-old son, or 36-year-old son, like talking in a microphone, which is insane because that one decision that was made.
Well, and it was a very fast decision. I mean, we met around the second week of August.
Yeah.
We met twice. Well, actually, probably, I guess, 4 times total. We did 2 weekends.
Take the mic a little closer.
We did 2 weekends,
There you go.
and 2 days of each weekend we
Yeah.
skated. And then I went to Connecticut for my 21st birthday, and then didn't come back for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And she was not happy.
Yeah, sure.
But then,
Well, because she wasn't happy because y'all scheduled to meet.
oh yeah, I mean,
Right.
I'd said when I came back, and instead of going back down there, I went to the Oktoberfest.
Right.
So, but I was young, and then
Were you a drinker then? Were you drinking at Oktoberfest? I mean, isn't that what it's about? I've never been, but
it's drinking beer. It's not a drunk fest.
Oktoberfest is not a drunk fest.
No, not in Germany. No, seriously.
Okay.
It's-
I mean, what happens when you drink a lot of beer? You get drunk.
Yes, you do. And German beer is very rich in alcohol. But the concept is not. It's more dancing and stuff like that than now. Young people get drunk, but the
Yeah.
older people.
Right.
And so at any rate, but so when I came back, it was the middle of October, and then about Thanksgiving, we were walking down the street. I was not allowed to date her. We had to meet in a clandestine manner.
Help me out with that.
We couldn't be seen together,
Okay.
so we would meet at the ice skating rink. Or when we would be walking down the street, I would meet her after she worked in a movie theater, and so I would go to the movie theater. And after she took the tickets and did all the things, she'd come into the darkened movie theater. Or if we were on the street, it would be night, and so.
Well, tell me why. I mean, I know why,
Well,
but tell people why.
She's Greek, and she comes from a very, at that point, a very strict Greek family. So you were not allowed to date. Her dad's concept was they had come up to Germany from Greece so that she could be educated, and that was what was going to happen. So
Right.
I was the first foreigner into their family. And he did not have very high regard for me.
For you or any foreigners?
Any foreigner.
Right. Is that like, so I know maybe it's still this way in Greece. I don't know. But is that kind of the thought is, American, I've got a great relationship with my cousins over there. So maybe that's different, but is it still where Americans are looked not down upon, but just,
it really depends, depends on where you're at. Tourists love you.
right.
But they love you because of your money, not because of who you are.
Of course.
But in some places in Greece, Americans have a great reputation. In other places in Greece, they don't.
Mm-hmm.
The people who have the worst reputation in Greece are the British, because they are hard partiers.
Gotcha. Well, but how did he end up to where you kind of won him over, or did you?
Yeah, no, as a matter of fact, I did. But it was my mother-in-law who was the catalyst in that. When they discovered that I purchased an engagement ring for Tony.
We're going to have to talk about that story too.
But. Yeah, it was kind of interesting. Oh, go there now. We were walking down the street. It was Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And I asked her what she wanted for Christmas. And she said a ring. And now she swears to this day that all she wanted was a friendship ring.
Yep. That's what she told me 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's not true. So we went to the store and the jewelry store, and I bought her an engagement ring, and she didn't not take it. So that's why,
right? Yeah.
So, but anyway.
And you bought her an engagement ring.
Yeah, it was a diamond ring.
Yeah, a diamond ring. Right. In her culture, I would imagine a diamond ring still meant an engagement.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So at any rate, she would take it off when she would get to the house. And,
by the way, I'm gonna have to talk to her about this after. Still, so
okay. But she would take the ring off when she got to the house and put it on when she left the house. And at any rate, when her father discovered it, he was very upset.
Yes.
And so he called a family meeting. And if you've ever seen the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, that was very, very similar. I mean, it was. I know nothing about him. I know nothing, about his family. And so they had a huge family meeting, and we had one brother who was visiting there with his fiancée, a brother who was working in Germany with his wife, and then three sisters and Tony, and my mother and father-in-law.
Right.
And so we all sat at a huge table, and they served food. Oh, it was an unbelievable meal. And after the meal, my father-in-law,
kind of a celebration of sorts.
Well, no, it was a questioning. It
right.
was, So after the meal, my father-in-law, in German, although he spoke very broken German, asked if I was satisfied with the meal, and I said yes, thank you. It was very delicious. And so then he looked at my future sister-in-law, who was studying to be a doctor at that point, and she said, "And now we come to the problem." And that's how they started the conversation. And they would ask a question, I would answer the question, they would talk, and they would do it in German and in Greek.
Right.
And then they would talk back and forth some more.
Of which
I
knew
understood German.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, no Greek at all. And then they would ask another question, and then they'd argue and so on. And about an hour later or so, my father stood up. He was sitting like we are, just right across from one another. Mm-hmm. He stood up and leaned across the table and grabbed me, and I thought, I'm dead meat. And he said, "Welcome to the family," and that was it.
But so how was Yaya or your mother-in-law a catalyst in this?
My father-in-law got upset with me one day.
Mm-hmm. This is before the meal?
No, this is after. No, I'd only met them one time before, and it was under. They didn't know who I was when I met them.
Were y'all engaged when you met already?
The second time.
Okay.
Not the first time. So, at any rate,
I just can't imagine, man. I can't imagine now. Well, one, I can't imagine you doing that whenever you're so young, or that just being a thing. I mean, maybe it was like that then, but I just can't imagine 21 or 22 and
21.
You've met your in-laws once or twice. I guess it's kind of like some of these TV shows now, real honestly, but it's crazy. I just can't imagine.
So my mother-in-law went to the hospital for some reason. I don't remember why. And my father-in-law got upset with me, or my future father-in-law got upset with me, and told me to get out. And
Of the hospital, the room, or what?
No, get out of the house.
Oh, okay.
You know, and Tony, I guess, talked to your mom, talked to my mother-in-law, my future mother-in-law, and my future mother-in-law calmed him down and got him to relent. And she and I had an incredible relationship with one another, just absolutely.
Even though y'all
incredible.
couldn't really communicate very well? Or?
Well, we communicated in German, but it was not, her German was not good, my German was not good, and so we were not good together.
Yeah, sure, of course, yeah. So how did all this end up? You got married, obviously.
Yeah, we had to fly down to Greece to get married.
Not in Germany. Why not?
Well, because of my military security clearance, I had to have a background check run on Tony's family, mom's family.
Okay.
And they were taking a significant amount of time to run that background check. And we were scheduled to be married on June 25th, June 26th. And June came along and the paperwork was not ready. June passed and the paperwork was still not ready. And my father-in-law was getting more and more
Irritated,
antsy about what was going on. And so...
because they're doing a background check on them.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Because of my security clearance. And so I went to my commanding officer and said, "Sir, what am I going to do?" And he said, "Well, if you got married in another country, I couldn't do anything about it. And we'd work it so that you wouldn't lose your security clearance." So I said, "Well, okay." And so we flew down to Greece and had to go through a significant process with the Orthodox Church to get married. And we did that in 2 weeks. And I came back, I was married, and the S2 officer, that's the security officer, took care of my problem. And
so ultimately, it was just because you were in the same country that they were living in?
I couldn't marry her in Germany. I had to, without this paperwork.
Right. Because you were stationed there.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't know why. I mean, to me.
Well, it was just
Government?
Yeah. Again, if I'd gone to the United States, I could have gotten married.
Right.
It was just a different country.
Yeah, sure. So you're married now. You are in the military still. You're, 3 years? First 4 years?
No, it's the first 3 years of the military.
Okay, so you're in the military. What happens after that?
So my grandmother died, and so we were sent back to the United States.
Your grandmother here. You're like
not
mom.
Your grandmother's mother.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Died.
Yep.
And so we were sent
What was
back
her name?
to the States.
Blanche?
No, not her name was Georgia.
Georgia. Oh,
Called
okay.
Raya.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, there you go.
And so she passed, and so we were sent back to the United States, and I ultimately was sent to El Paso. And then Mom became pregnant with Raya, and I was sent on orders back to Germany. And so Mom went to Connecticut, and Raya was born in Connecticut, and then she joined me in Germany.
Right. How old was Mom?
Mom was 18 when we got married.
Right.
Just 18.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so...
How long were you engaged?
Our official engagement was March 18th
Right.
of 1972.
So she was 17 when y'all were engaged?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Is that legal now here? I mean,
Sure.
whatever back then, whatever, but that's wild.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. Well, I mean, okay, so like, what if Katerina came to you, or Rye, either one, and was like, "I'm engaged," and she's a senior in high school?
Katerina did that when she was in the military. And she was in the military just after she graduated from high school.
Well, but she was older than that, though.
She was just 18.
So, but she didn't get married to him.
Well, maybe she was 19, but
I mean, yeah. I mean, I still think that's a big difference between like was mom in high school then?
Yes.
She was in high school when she was engaged.
Yeah.
Yee! It just puts a different like spin on it, right? I mean, it's obviously worked out. 48 years, headed towards 50, and it obviously puts it obviously worked out, but it makes you kind of think in 2020 now, like how that would be. Like that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's very rare, or it's a lot more rare.
Right. Well, I would say now it would be frowned upon versus then maybe it wasn't frowned upon. And I'm not talking about the 17-year-old thing. I'm talking about like just you're too young.
Yeah, probably. The average age of marriage now is between 24 and 26, I guess, in the United States.
Yeah, no clue.
So it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
I mean, I really think back when I was growing up, and particularly if you were military, you grew up a lot faster. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you were going to get shot at, chances are you were going to grow up.
Yeah, right. Well, sure, no doubt about it. Well, and you were what? You were 20? 21?
I was 20 when I got married.
Yeah, 20. So, I mean, we're not talking like an astronomical age
actually,
difference.
I was 22 when I got married.
22. So 22 and 18.
Yeah.
Yeah. So y'all get married. Y'all are in the military. Tell me about some of the people that you met in there and how that kind of shaped you moving forward.
When we came back to Germany, after Rye was born, I ended up being stationed in a town by the name of Schweinfurt, which has an interesting history. First of all, its name means pig crossing.
Okay.
But during the Second World War, they had a ball bearing factory in Schweinfurt that was bombed regularly.
A ball bearing.
Ball bearing.
Why would that be bombed?
Well, because ball bearings are used in everything military.
Okay.
And so it was. What was interesting about it was that the Americans never actually bombed the ball bearing factory.
Yeah.
The Germans built a wooden ball bearing factory, a huge ball bearing factory. The Americans would bomb it. 3 weeks later, there'd be a whole big building again, and the Americans would bomb it.
Okay.
And they never actually touched the ball bearing factory.
What do you mean they never actually touched the ball bearing factory?
The wooden ball bearing factory was about 10 miles away from where the actual factory was.
Okay. The Americans just didn't know.
And the Americans didn't know it.
Okay.
The other interesting thing about Schweinfurt was that its airfield, there was a Luftwaffe base there. And as a matter of fact, I stayed in Second World War barracks there. There was an airfield there, and they used to sink the airfield every single night when the planes came back. So you remember that the Americans used to bomb at night and during the day. And so what would happen is during the day, if you flew over this field, it would look like it was a lake.
Right.
And they had a drainage system where, as it began to get dark, they would drain the field, and the fighters would come out and take off from this field, and then come back, and the fighters would all go back underground, and then they would flood the field again.
That's very sophisticated.
Oh, it was incredible.
That's incredible.
In Schweinfurt, when I was there, you could actually go into some of the tunnels. Now, many of them were tied off, and because they booby trapped and things like that.
Yeah.
But you were able to get into at least the initial parts of the tunnels.
What years was that? Like when?
When was I in Schweinfurt?
Well, yeah. Whenever they had this type of technology, or would not be able to do that.
Second World War, 1945, 1944.
Wow, that's incredible that they were able to do that.
Oh yeah. Well, if you think that's incredible, this is a complete aside.
Sure.
On the island of Crete, where your mom was born, in northern Crete, in a little town by the name of Heraklion, there is the castle of Knossos, which is just outside of Heraklion. There is a tunnel that goes the entire width of the island of Crete that ends up at a place called Festos, okay? And the king would literally travel from Heraklion to Festos, and he could do it completely underground.
Underground.
And that was That was in the 4th, 5th, 6th centuries BC.
Well, that's crazy because, I mean, how would they, like, walk?
Huh?
I mean, it's not like a large island, but, I mean, that's a long walk.
It's a long walk.
That's a long time to be underground.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, so you
So-
meet who?
So when I was in Schweinfurt, I met a chaplain by the name of Bill Clark.
And the reason why I want to bring this up is because, I mean, this shaped the rest of your
Right.
life, basically.
So I had grown up with a very non-religious background.
Right.
And even though we had gotten married in a Greek Orthodox church, we still were not real practicing Christians. And so I met a chaplain by the name of Bill Clark. He was a Southern Baptist. And we became very good friends. As a matter of fact, he discipled your mom and me for 3.5 years. And about a year into it, I really became convinced that I was supposed to become a chaplain. Now, I still had some time left on my enlistment. But during that time, I did as much studying as I could possibly do so that when I got out of the Army, I could go to school and then go to seminary and go back in as a chaplain.
Right.
So Bill was very, very critical to my change of my walk in life.
Yeah, I would say, you know, outside of meeting Mom, correct me if I'm wrong, like he and your kind of trio of friends, Dan Homeyer, were, I mean, they shaped your life moving
Yeah.
forward.
Oh, yeah.
Like, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Because there's, you know, just learning over the years that what you did, who you've become as far as a Christian and servant and all of that is because of that relationship.
Yeah, and Bill and I still communicate.
For sure.
Probably once a week.
Right.
And that's been 50 years.
Right. All right. So, but you meet him, you don't necessarily go into business with him or anything like that or chaplain just yet, right? I mean,
After he retired, he worked for us.
Right.
Both he and Dan worked for InfoTrain.
Okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
And we did a couple of things together ministry wise.
Right.
And after he and Dan left, it was much more of a friendship because they moved down to San Antonio, and we were up in Dallas, and so it was.
I'm actually kind of surprised that you didn't move to San Antonio.
Bill and Dan really wanted me to.
Yeah.
But we just really felt that God wasn't in that for us.
What years did they move down there?
Well, Bill retired in 1992 and bought his house.
Gotcha. So
down there in 91. So
we were in school, like
Yeah.
doing all that stuff. Okay, I thought that was earlier whenever they moved there.
No.
Gotcha.
Dan graduated with his master's degree from East Texas State right around that time period. Linda was doing her doctorate at North Texas State. And so they'd moved down she became the head of the counseling department at Southwest Texas State University down in San Marcos.
Right.
And so they moved down there.
Right. Okay. So from that though, where do you go after you're out of the military?
So after I left the Army, I went to Dallas Bible College. And within 6 months, I had been diagnosed as having multiple sclerosis. So that stopped my being able to go back into the Army.
So your plan of becoming a chaplain was kind of...
It was just blown in the wind.
Right.
And so I changed my entire educational thought. Instead of going to Dallas Seminary, as I wanted to go to Dallas Seminary, I decided to do a hybrid master's. So by that I mean half of my master's degree would be in theology and the other half would be in student personnel and guidance. And Dallas Bible College hired me as the Dean of Men and then ultimately the Director of Admissions.
Remind me what a Dean of Men is.
Dean of Men is basically the person who is a social worker for the men of the college, for the students in the college. So if you need somebody or you need something, the Dean of Men and the Dean of Women basically are there to do it.
And how big was the school?
The school was very small when I was going there. We had 150 full-time students.
Okay.
When I was going there, my graduating class was 28. My master's degree class was 8.
It's so crazy. It's almost like that's like a small high school now.
Oh, it wasn't, yeah. I mean, it was not even a small high school. It was,
Right.
I mean, comparatively, I mean, the town we live in now has a high school of 400 kids.
Yeah, right. Yeah, which is still a small high school.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
But that was a college. That was bigger than the college.
yeah.
So were y'all? Was it a campus or was
No,
it a building or how?
They had a very nice campus, 3 acres,
Yeah.
right across the street from Eastfield
Right.
College.
Yeah. I need to drive by there because I don't think that I've ever. Maybe I have. Knowingly, I know that I was born whenever you were there, so obviously I've been there. But I don't know if I've knowingly driven by Dallas Bible College,
Yeah, of course, it doesn't exist anymore.
the buildings or anything.
The building's still there.
Yeah. Right.
Dallas Can purchased it for a while, and they're the high school prep
Yeah. The
people.
Dallas Can Academy. Mm-hmm.
And then another company has purchased it.
Yeah.
But it was a very nice campus. And then they moved out to East Texas. And when they moved, that's where I left.
Right.
So,
Well, so in a way, if you want to fast forward a little bit, because I
Sure.
want to dive into you running your businesses, because
Sure.
that's what this is basically about. Ultimately, how'd you get into? So you're at the Bible College, but how'd you transition to working in computers?
a very interesting story. When they hired me as the director of admissions, they had no organized way to recruit students.
Okay.
It was basically word of mouth, and we had 150 full-time students, and so I developed a program to start contacting potential students and regularly mail to them. To do that, I needed to have a PC. Well, the only PC that was available for us at that point was a Radio Shack TRS-80
Okay.
with a great big 8-inch floppy disks. And
Keep talking. I want to look that up.
and it was very. I mean, it was a console computer. I mean, it was huge.
TRS-80 computer.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not even a computer. It's a typewriter. Okay.
And so
I mean, obviously it's a computer, but
so at any rate, so I developed a database program to track the potential students and the prospective students. And when I left, because I'd gotten in the computers there, and interestingly enough, I paid for my master's degree. At least the Army paid for my master's degree, but I had to eat.
right.
So part of the way that we made extra money was I bought two Commodore 64 computers.
Okay.
With daisy wheel printers and a software program called Paperclip, which was the word processor. And I hired 2 wives of seminary students, and they typed papers for the seminary students, and we charged $1 a page.
So they would write it down on their.
Handwrite it, and
Okay.
and the women would
That's
would
what I'm
type
talking
it.
about. That's
and,
awesome.
and that's how we paid for a significant amount of our living expenses.
Right.
Because they would charge $1 a page. Right. I would pay the people who typed it 50 cents a page. Okay. And we had a thriving business. We ultimately had three computers
Right.
when we stopped doing that.
Isn't that crazy? It's that, in a way, like that's such a simple deal, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like business is overcomplicated sometimes. It's really, like you said earlier, work hard, know what you're doing, and you'll make money. It's, hey, I'm going to buy a couple of computers and I'm going to solve the problem of people don't have a computer to type up their paper, or they don't want to, or whatever.
They had a typewriter, and
Yeah.
if you don't know how to type, you make more mistakes than
Yeah. So now I don't know if $1 a page was a lot or a little back then, but
It was significant, but it wasn't overwhelming.
Right.
I mean, you typed a thesis. A thesis was normally 60 to 100 pages, so it cost them $100.
yeah. And now they have their paper written for them. But okay, so how much were these computers?
The Commodore 64 was about, if I remember correctly, it was about $300 for the computer, another $50 or $70 for the monitor.
The monitor looks like a TV, like an old TV.
Well, that's
with
really
like
yeah.
buttons that for channels.
Yeah. Now you're looking at the TRS-80. I did Commodore 64.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're right.
Commodore
Right.
64 had a keyboard, and the computer was in the keyboard.
Yeah.
And then there was a monitor, and you had a separate disk drive.
Okay.
And
So, but why wouldn't they? Why weren't personal computers like a thing then, to where like everybody had one in college? Was it just because of the expense of it?
yeah, I mean, $300 back then was, that was a lot of money.
Right.
And then to buy the software and to buy the printer itself was another $200.
Yeah.
And so,
So you're into computers by typing people's
papers.
Were you typing, or were you just hired people to type? If you just hired people to type, I love that. That's
I just hired people to type. I typed some papers. And that's kind of an interesting story in itself. When I was and this is true, this is absolutely 100% true. When I was in sixth grade, after I graduated from sixth grade, between the summer of my sixth grade year and the summer of my seventh grade year, my father had become convinced in my sixth grade year that I would account to nothing, that I was pretty useless in my life.
11 years old.
12 years old.
12 years old, 1962.
Yeah.
Okay.
1963.
Okay.
And so he sent me to a secretarial school in Tucson to learn how to type.
Okay.
Because he said, if I know how to type, I can always get a job. So his expectation for me was that I would be in a secretarial pool typing, and that's the level I was going to be at forever. Okay?
But what's interesting about that is, while his intention was that, he actually gave you a great skill.
Yeah.
Like that was big time for 1965 or whatever.
Yeah, and see, the problem is I can't type.
Anymore, or ever could?
Ever.
How?
He became, I'll tell you.
You had a 40-person computer business company, and you can't type?
I can't sight read and type at the same time.
Okay.
My mind does not function that way. And so because of that, I could read a paragraph, basically memorize that paragraph, type it out by looking at the keys, and then go back and read another paragraph and type it out. Right. Now I forget it within minutes. I've forgotten that paragraph. But the way I type is I look at
the keys.
I look at the keys. And back then you couldn't look at the keys. They literally had caps on the keys.
Sure. Yeah.
And
that's how I learned how to type too. They put, well, I don't know about caps, but they put like a little manila folder above your hands to where you wouldn't.
Yeah, they had caps on ours, so they were completely blank.
Oh, it's blank. Yeah, I got you.
And so my father was completely frustrated. So between my sixth grade year and my seventh grade year and the seventh grade year and eighth grade year, he sent me to the school. And he was so frustrated at the end of the seventh grade year that he never thought I would be able to do anything because I couldn't learn to type.
Wow.
So at any rate, to move on down the pike,
Yeah.
so that's why I never typed.
I guess I didn't even know that you never typed. I mean, I just figured that you had to type emails. Like, are you like a?
No,
You
before I had the strokes.
You're just saying you just look at the keys whenever you type.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can type. You just can't look at the screen and type at the same time.
I can't look at a paper and type at the same time.
Right. So you look at the screen while you type? Or
Yes.
Well, you did. Right.
I glanced at the screen and the key and and the hands.
How about that?
So anyway, but
the point of that was that he didn't think that you were going to amount to anything, so he sent you to a secretary school.
Right.
Yeah.
And so fast forward, now I learned how to do database work. When I left the college, a friend of mine who had been at the college as well was working for a company called Compro Computers. And he talked Doug, the owner, into hiring me.
Who's the friend of yours?
Lance Keith.
Lance, okay. So Lance help you get the job there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I met Doug, and we talked for a little while. He hired me, and in a couple of months, I was managing 2 computer centers, and selling Macs and some IBMs. Actually, it was Toshiba's at that point, but mainly Macs.
Right.
Okay.
So you have your own, at one point, thriving computer paper company, and then you go to work for this computer place. Next thing you know, you're running these two of them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How does that transition you into now you own your own business? Because right now you're an employee for this guy.
Doug told me to fire Lance one day.
Yeah.
And I said I would do that because he was paying me, but I would quit immediately afterwards.
And Lance, just to set the whatever, is a friend of yours?
Oh, yeah.
Or not just a guy that was working for you.
We've known each other. We've known each other now since '82.
Yeah, right.
Or actually '81.
So you fire Lance, but you also quit at the same
Right.
time. Okay, and then you do what?
And then
You don't have a job, so you
I don't have a job,
something out.
and so your mom and I decided that we'd open up a computer company and start doing something. We had no idea what that something was, but
Yeah.
we thought we could sell them and things like that.
Go ahead.
And then ultimately, we started training people,
Mm-hmm.
and then your mom was cold calling and whatever. I got the Johnson & Johnson account. I don't remember how I did it, but I got that. And then your mom called TI and on a cold call, and we got an TI account and started teaching all of their classes in their what was known as DSEG, their military department.
So just to back up a little bit to explain to people what you were doing, you were training them on
Microsoft Word,
Microsoft
Microsoft PowerPoint, stuff like that.
What was the biggest? Did you have any fears about starting your own business?
No.
Like you had but you had a family of 3 or 4.
4.
You had a family of 4 at this time, and you thought, okay, I don't have a job, I don't have income. Let's start my own business.
Right.
Okay. And no fear about failure or what?
Nope.
Why not? Is that because you didn't have money anyway? So you were just like, if it collapses, I'm in the same spot?
No, I think it was because that was my mindset that
Right.
that God was going to take care of me and this is what He wanted me to do. So go ahead and do it.
Right.
And certainly we struggled, but
Sure.
we never were in a situation where we needed help to get food on plates or something like that.
Well, but I guess what I'm questioning is like it can be a big step, right? I mean, I don't know if you owned a house or not, but you have to pay rent, right? And so if you don't pay rent, then they kick you out. You have to provide for, 4 kids. There's insurance. There's, the electric bills, the utility bills, all that stuff, cars. And it was just no big deal. We'll just start. I mean, because I didn't have that. I mean, I worked 2 jobs for 4.5 years just to kind of get up the will to do it, right? To say, okay, yeah, I'm going to go out on my own. I established myself before I.
Yeah, see that's never been a problem for me.
Right.
When I left the Army, I came to Dallas with no job,
Yeah.
no prospects of a job, going to school, not knowing how I was going to pay for school,
Right.
and your mom and I just kind of the way we handle things in life is all right. This is what we're supposed to do. Let's go and do it, and
Right.
we'll figure it out.
So
along
just
the way.
do,
Yeah.
right? Like just
Yeah.
do and it will work out.
Yeah, and sometimes it works out good, and sometimes it works out bad, but
Right.
it always worked out.
Right. So you have this company now. You're training at Johnson & Johnson. You're training at TI. You're training at other bigger companies. What are some of the challenges that you had whenever you're getting going? Let's stay with like whenever you're getting going. What are some of the challenges you had starting out?
Well, we wrote our own curriculum.
Okay.
So if software changed, we had to rewrite all the curriculum.
Right. So you're training Microsoft Word, Office, Excel, all of that stuff. You write the curriculum. It's not like Microsoft sent you, hey, these are some bullet points to cover in the training classes.
We had to learn the programs and write the curriculum. And so ultimately we had 3 people writing, but in the beginning, I was literally writing the curriculum, printing it, and teaching it. And so sometimes I'd work all night
Yeah.
in writing the curriculum, printing it, and then going and teaching it. Yeah. And so
In the meantime, you had to actually learn it
Yeah.
to write it.
yeah,
So how does one go about learning Microsoft Excel by themselves when there's no YouTube, there's no this, there's no training from Microsoft? Because I would imagine that if there was training from Microsoft, then they would just go to Microsoft. and get trained.
Microsoft had a manual.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So you'd look up in the manual and you'd basically just start from there and you'd learn how to do it and then you'd go write about it.
Which is great. So why couldn't you just use the manual that Microsoft gave as
Well,
your, kind of your
they would
course
only
guide?
give one copy of the manual for your software package.
And you couldn't copy.
No,
it's illegal to copy.
It's illegal to copy.
To copy the manual, even though you're training people on that software that
Yeah.
I mean, everybody has it in the room. So why?
No, they don't. They
How do you train Microsoft Excel without practicing it?
well, no, they had the software, but when they buy the licenses, they don't get the manuals. So what Microsoft would do is they'd license the software to Texas Instruments, but they wouldn't send manuals for that.
That's amazing, because wouldn't you think that they would do that just to make sure? And it worked out for them. Listen, they're Microsoft's a huge company, but wouldn't you think that they would send the manual with the license? That way everybody would learn it, and so therefore then continue to use it. I know that they were the only player in the game, so that obviously was a big deal, but you would think that if everybody learned and got comfortable with it, then it would spread.
Yeah, you'd think that, but most people don't learn through manuals. Most people, our manuals were completely different from the manual that Microsoft sent out. Mm-hmm. So our manuals were very, very specific, and there's a difference between training and teaching. Mm-hmm. And people kind of look at you and say, "What?" In teaching, we're giving you the philosophy behind something so you can think about it. Okay. In training, we're telling you do this step, do this step, do this step, do this step.
Okay.
So each one of our manuals were, I'm going to say, they were closely written for each company. So, for example, a manual that I wrote for TI would be used at IBM, okay, but it was not the same manual. There would be major changes in the manual because IBM would say, "Hey, we want you to concentrate on this,"
right?
And TI would say, "We want you to concentrate on that." So part of our skill set was that we could go to a company and say, "Hey, listen, you give us what you want them to learn. I'll put it in the manual for them and make it your manual."
Yeah, you kind of customize it for them. Yeah, for sure.
And of course, regular manuals that come from Microsoft don't do that.
Right. So again, what are the challenges though that you had leading up to this stuff? I mean, just and I'm not talking about just learning and writing, because that obviously takes time and effort and all that stuff. But from like a logistics standpoint, like a hiring or firing, or how do we, where do we locate our business, like office space, like any of that stuff that was a challenge for you guys, or?
Somewhat. Our first office was over in Grand Prairie because Johnson & Johnson was our major customer at that point. Mm-hmm. And then we got Bell Helicopter, and that was over in that area as well. So we did in Grand Prairie. And then when we got TI, TI had their own locations, so we just went to their locations. Ultimately, we opened up an office in Richardson to service TI when TI said, "Hey, listen, we'd like you to expand this and bring people off campus," and we did that. So it was just one thing after another, and you just kind of run with it.
Yeah, sure.
And that was probably the biggest failure that we had, was the fact that I really didn't have anybody who could take over pieces of it.
Yeah.
So I could do other things, and that was my biggest failure.
Yeah. So ultimately, what were you doing though? You were selling, or you were training?
Yes.
Both. I mean, obviously, in a small business, you do kind of everything, but you're saying that because you didn't say, "Hey, this is your job, this is your job, this is your job," take that off of your shoulders, and so where you could just run the company, that was your biggest failure?
Yeah. I was not very good at hiring people other than trainers.
Right.
I was incredibly successful hiring trainers, but hiring people who were good managers, who could take a particular, like a sales department, and run with the sales department, somehow I was not very good at getting those people.
Right.
And that cost us. I mean, that hurt us a lot.
Whenever you say that, did you hire people to do that?
Oh, yeah.
They just weren't successful.
Yeah.
Or?
They weren't successful.
Right.
And
are they not successful because of they aren't because they aren't good, or is it from? Or are you the type of person like it's from the top down, right?
Yeah, I think it was from the top down. I mean, I was always very successful. As a matter of fact, we had one person who was on our board who made the statement: if we could clone Blanchard 10 times, it would be incredible.
Right.
But I was not good at directing people. I would tell people, this is what I want done. Give me a plan for you to do it. They'd give me the plan, but then they wouldn't execute the plan.
Right.
And because I was traveling and selling and training and doing all that, I just didn't have time to watch them.
Right.
And we were paying a very good salary for many of these people.
Do you think that, I mean, just an employee in general is not going to have the same interest in the company that you are, though, right? It's your company. They view you as getting rich off their back. Maybe, I mean.
No, it's very interesting. Probably the biggest problem with entrepreneurial type environments is that as a small entrepreneur, people think that you are getting rich on their back.
Yeah, right.
And so they don't have a desire to serve the company. It's different in a large company, and I don't understand why. If you work for IBM, you work as hard as you can possibly work for IBM. I mean, there are people who work incredible hours, and their desire to see IBM grow and excuse me, they have no desire to do anything but work for IBM. Whereas in small companies, people have a different headset, and I don't know why.
You think that two things. Do you think, one, it's a culture, and then two, do you think that small companies are viewed as a stepping stone? Mm-hmm. So both.
I think it's both. Yeah. And I think that people who can get a job at a big company tend not to get a job at a small company.
Yeah. Well, and I do think that people have an allure of, oh, I work for Google, right? Oh, I work for Amazon. It's like now you feel important because people know the name of your company. Oh, I work for the Gingrich Group. Who?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm a realtor. Oh, cool. Where you work at Keller or Colwell?
Right.
Whatever, Ebby. No, I work with a company called the Gingrich Group. Oh, okay. So you don't get the same reaction, right? And so therefore it makes people, the perception is like you're not as valuable. But
yeah, and I think also people who work for small companies may or may not have a kind of entrepreneurial bug in them as well, because we had several people who we hired, trained, and then they competed with us.
Yeah, right. But isn't that just, so we talked about that the other day. Is that something that is almost to be expected?
Yes.
Unfortunately, it's unfortunate, right? But you were telling me the story, and you can tell it now too, but of a client that you spent $50,000 training and then just got up and left.
Yeah.
Right. But your thought on that is just because it's to be expected, okay? Or you don't, I mean.
Well, I'm not okay with it, but it's going to happen, and.
But how do you stop it from happening? Or at least like, not make it to where it's not happening all the time. A business cannot afford to do that over and over and over again.
Well, that's exactly right. And so that again is hiring the type of people. Now you try as hard as you can, but there are just people out there who are users, and they will use anything they can because they're very selfish. We used to pay people a lot of money. Our average trainer, full-time trainer, probably made $70,000 to $90,000 a year, and this is back in the 90s. Okay, and that was a lot of money back then.
Right. Yeah.
Now,
what do you think the equivalent, like not your at a different company? What do you think that they were making
at a different company? Probably the same.
Doing the same thing though.
Yeah, they were probably.
Oh, so that was kind of industry.
Yeah,
standard.
And everybody was competing because a good trainer was very difficult to find, and so they'd outbid you. People would come to me and say, "Hey, such and such a company just offered me this," and I look at them and say, "Okay."
Yeah.
And I never would try and keep them, because my idea was that if you're willing to do that, then you're probably not the kind of person that I want to have
Yeah.
helping build this company.
Right. So any times where that happened that you wish, man, I probably should have paid $10,000 more dollars.
No.
No. Any employees did a lot of them take up those offers?
Some of them did. We had many of our trainers were seminary students. So they had a goal of being in a ministerial position somewhere anyway.
Yeah.
So they weren't very interested in doing corporate hopping.
Right.
And they were probably our best trainers because they were used to getting in front of people. That
No doubt.
if you know language, you have a mindset to learn software. It's just that's the way it is. And so many of those who were seminary students, we didn't have a problem with. It was people who were outside of that area
Yeah.
that give us the most problem.
Yeah. What was your biggest success or what do you feel like was your biggest success as a business owner? Like, or what do you could define that as what you're most proud of. You can define that as, hey, this deal was a big deal. It provided for, family or provided for the business or.
I think there are three things that were really marked what Mom and I did. The first one was we cared for the people in the company. One Christmas, our Christmas bonus was we flew everybody down to Cancun for 4 or 5 days.
Yep.
And their wives, we just flew them all down there. It was totally cost free. So we did that. So that was kind of a big deal for us. I'm very proud of what we built with Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah.
I mean, I was capable of going into a Verizon and teaching the president of Verizon, the president of the DSEG, which was TI's military base. I literally taught him how to use a laptop on a Learjet flying from Dallas to Washington. Okay, and then he came back on a commercial plane, first class, of course. Came back on a commercial plane, and he met a congressman. I won't tell you the congressman's name. He met the congressman on the plane. He was working on his laptop. The congressman asked, "How did you learn this?" He says, "I've got a trainer that you got to go talk to." And so he made an arrangement and paid me to go and train this congressman on how to use his notebook computer.
How about that? But that just goes back to me. It's like you never know the person that you're talking to where it's going to.
That's
lead,
exactly right.
Right.
And so you do your best job you possibly can. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is that we were able to, through this, God allowed us to basically help each one of you, the three of you that went to college, graduate from college without a significant bill.
Sure.
I think Ryan took out maybe one loan. It was a very small loan. I don't know. I don't think you did at all.
I did $2,400, but
Yeah.
literally compared to my friends, that's basically nothing.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's nothing compared.
So Mom and I are very proud of that. You all worked. I mean, you did baseball.
Yeah.
And then Katerina, of course, our youngest. I'm so very proud of her because she went to the Army and was trained as a nurse. So I think all of you. I think that's a very proud part of our.
Right.
So those three things are probably the things.
Well, and I think
critical.
what makes that neat is that it was started from nothing, I think is what you're getting at. It was started from nothing, and now we were able to put this life together for our kids and send them to college, which is a huge expense, and for them not to have any substantial debt coming out. I mean, that's a huge, from nothing
Right.
to that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that we gave each one of you a desire to be on your own, so to speak. We only have one person who is in the corporate world. I mean, everybody else is basically doing their own thing, so to speak.
Right.
And the one who's in the corporate world is really an entrepreneur because she came in and worked from a basic accountant to becoming the chief financial officer.
Right. Yeah. Very, very impressive. I think that there's no doubt that's probably the coolest thing and most satisfying thing from my standpoint too about opening up your own business or own shop or whatnot is, whenever you have the magic trick of making money appear from nothing, it's I'm not the money. I like money a lot, but it's not necessarily the money. It's about how you can provide for your family, like the things that you're able to do. And it's not just by going and punching in a 9-to-5, knowing that you're going to make $2,000, right? It's an interesting thing. Like it's a really neat deal to know that it's because of what you did, right? You're going to fail or succeed based on what you do. And so I think that's or what you do or what you built.
And I think that's one of the things that a pastoral relationship is in the same environment, because while a pastor isn't there to make money, right? A pastor is there on his own or her own, if she's in an area that it has female pastors, that they are there as entrepreneurs, so to speak,
right? Because
it's their ministry, so to speak,
yeah.
And they have to have the same kind of headset,
which is awesome. So next up, what you kind of have going on now is this daily devotion called Running to Him. So every day you post a devotion on Facebook, YouTube about
what we do is we have a reading plan. So every quarter, basically, we put together a reading plan, and then we go through a set of books or a book over that quarter. Normally, it's a set of books. And I send out a daily devotion. I video it and I write it. And we put it on YouTube and Facebook. Yeah. And then also we do an email.
Right. And it's kind of in conjunction with the Civil Air Patrol being a chaplain there. Not together, but you're doing both at the same time.
Yeah.
Right?
And so 45 years after I got out of the Army to be a chaplain.
Yeah.
I became a Civil Air Patrol chaplain, and Civil Air Patrol is an organization. It's the auxiliary of the Air Force. You are not in the Air Force, but you're assigned to 1st Air Force. So what Civil Air Patrol does is search and rescue. They fly missions. For example, right now we have planes in the air that are delivering drugs and IV tests and whatever for this COVID thing, all over the United States. So, for example, this week, I'm spending every night from about 9:30 to 11 going over with a national group that says, this is how many sorties we flew, this is how many people we searched, these are the things we did. And so it's really an incredible ministry.
Right.
So I get to minister to about 250 people.
Awesome. Very cool. So if somebody wants to be on this newsletter for Running to Him or wants to see Running to Him, how do they reach out to you, or how do they view it?
The email.
I know it's on Facebook, but
yeah, you can go to Facebook on Running to Him, or you can go to YouTube and look up the Running to Him channel.
Yeah.
Or you can reach me at Phineas Jacobus at runningtohim.net.
Spell that for him.
PHINEAS JACOBUS at runningtohim.net.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Dad, thank you for sitting down, hanging out, and telling me a lot of the stuff I knew already, but it's really neat to get these little details from these stories that, I knew, but maybe I didn't know as deep as to, or the behind the scenes of the story or the event. And it was really cool. I appreciate you instilling the entrepreneurial spirit into me and kind of giving me that path to go down, because I don't necessarily want to be in a 9-to-5. I enjoy having a level of freedom, but while still running my own company. And so I appreciate you doing that for me and sacrificing all you did in order to provide for us. I appreciate that.
You know, your mom and I are very proud of each one of you, and I really enjoy being here today.
Awesome. Thanks.
You're welcome.